Why do WNBA players pose nude? It's not about titillation, it's about economics, image, and power. I'll start with a case that opened a rift within women's basketball. Liz Cambage, WNBA All-Star, reportedly made more money in her first week on OnlyFans than in her entire career in the league. She opened her account in 2021 after a season with the Las Vegas Aces in which her salary was around $221,000. That clash of numbers isn't just about a personal decision, it also speaks to the system. OnlyFans takes a 20% cut for the platform, operates outside app stores avoiding the 15 to 30% cuts from Apple, Google, and now boasts over 350 million users and nearly $8 billion in revenue in 2024. That setup tips the balance and explains why, for some athletes, the body can pay more than the box score. The uncomfortable question remains open and will guide us. Is this true empowerment, an economic escape from insufficient salaries, or a troubling symptom of an industry that rewards skin more than skill? Let's unpack that tension with the WNBA at the center. Salaries, sponsors, reputation, and the invisible cost of choosing or feeling like there's no other choice. Let's start with what hurts, cold numbers. In 2021, Liz Cambage earned approximately $221,000 with the Las Vegas Aces, a top salary for a WNBA All-Star. That amount isn't symbolic, but it does represent a ceiling that many players feel is low when compared to the actual level of attention they generate. That's why it was so jarring to see how reportedly she made more in her first week on OnlyFans than in her entire career in the league, with mentions of $1.5 million and the suggestion that at that annual pace, she'd far surpass her on-court earnings. That comparison is brutal because it's not about talent, it's about the pay system. A professional contract spanning years becomes dwarfed by 7 days of direct monetization. There's no need to romanticize it. Not all players will replicate those peaks, and even the source admits that without showing skin, the chances of really earning drop significantly, with the added risk of scaring off sponsors due to the association with adult content. But the gap exists, and it's big enough to shift behavior. On the WNBA side, the picture isn't static. Alongside audience growth, some stars are landing bigger endorsement deals, and there's optimism within the ecosystem about a new TV deal that could increase the pie. These are market signals. If the league captures attention more effectively, salary stops being the only lever. Even so, the salary gap issue isn't going away. It sparks debate every time these numbers collide. To understand why the economic equation is so tempting, it helps to widen the frame just a bit. Outside the W, most athletes don't live like superstars. In the Olympic world, for example, an average track and field athlete earns around $15,000 a year, while the IOC brings in over $7 billion per cycle and doesn't directly pay those who compete. Studies show that 80% of professional athletes in the US don't feel financially stable. Against that backdrop, turning to subscription platforms stops being provocative and becomes a survival mechanism to monetize an audience that already exists. The tension then isn't moral, it's financial. Where's the value of attention best captured? On one end, salary plus TV plus brands. On the other, direct subscription with spikes that, in cases like Cambage's, surpass a whole career in a matter of days. Between those two extremes lies the decision many players face today. How much is the game worth? How much is the image worth? And how much are you willing to risk to make the numbers add up? There's no mystery here. This is about incentive design. OnlyFans is built so that money flows from the fan to the creator, with a 20% cut for the platform and 80% for the producer.
Shut up and take my money!
That split is no accident. OF isn't in app stores, so it avoids the 15 to 30% toll from Apple, Google that would eat into any traditional app's margins. If that tax existed, sustaining the 80-20 model would be unfeasible. The result, a structure that, from a technical standpoint, makes the math work for anyone with their own audience. The other key element is scale. The material we're using mentions over 350 million users and nearly $8 billion in revenue in 2024. Add a detail that reveals how efficient the model is. 42 employees, approximately $31 million in revenue per employee, and dividends of nearly $500 million for the owner in the past year. This isn't a garage startup. It's a financially powerful platform that can pay more and demand fewer conditions than the traditional advertising ecosystem. There's also a built-in advantage for creators. User acquisition is outsourced. Athletes go viral on open platforms and redirect traffic to their paid profile. That means OF doesn't need to burn ad budgets like a typical social network. With lower marketing costs, the platform can focus on processing payments and improving payouts. From the perspective of a WNBA player with a real community, the equation is simple. If the audience already follows you and the paywall is right there, the conversion to income is direct. Compare that with the traditional ad-based model. On YouTube, for instance, creators get about 45% of ad revenue and are subject to advertisers, brand safety, and algorithms. On OF, the transaction is fan to creator, with no ad middlemen or unpredictable CPMs. You know exactly how much comes in from each subscription or tip. It's not that one model is better in the abstract, they're just different architectures. But one of them, OF's, offers a higher cut and fewer tolls when the attention is already yours. That's why when tight WNBA salaries are combined with a platform that pays well, takes a low cut, and offers global scale, the economic incentive for some players becomes too clear to ignore. This isn't about morality, it's about engineering. And that engineering, combined with the audience that already exists, explains why 1 week on a subscription model can outweigh years of a professional contract. The promise sounds neat and healthy. I'll show you my training, my meals, recovery, real life without filters. That builds community, creates engagement, and humanizes you. But when we move from affection to monetization, the sources we used are blunt. The content that pays the most isn't workouts or nutrition plans, it's sexualized content. If you're not willing to show skin, the chances of making serious money drop. It's that simple and that uncomfortable for sports. That's where the first toll appears: sponsorships. In the WNBA ecosystem, maintaining a clean brand is part of the job, not a bonus. When a player joins the blue site, the label of adult content, fair or not, can scare off sponsors who depend on brand safety. Today, it boosts your direct income. Tomorrow, that label can follow you like a shadow. It's the reputational boomerang. The decision pays, but it also hits back. The second toll is more personal, the line between choice and pressure. For some, joining OF is empowerment, image control, money without middlemen, their own rules. For others, especially with tight salaries, the system pushes them to increase exposure just to make ends meet. Where does freedom end and necessity begin? There's no clear boundary when the financial incentive is strong and constant. In practice, everything becomes surgical. Soft content, behind the scenes, Q&As, gym sessions, drives engagement and keeps brand school and foundation partnerships safe. The content that shows more skin speeds up revenue, yes, but narrows the pool of companies willing to walk with you. And what you post doesn't vanish. It stays in search engines, screenshots, articles. It comes back just when you're negotiating a contract, a campaign, or trying to relaunch your public image. This isn't moralizing, it's how the market works when attention is bought and sold by the minute. That's why the real dilemma isn't black or white. It's a 3-variable equation: money now, reputation later, and your athletic identity in between. At a certain point, everyone understands the same rule. Without skin, the numbers shrink. With skin, the risks grow. And the truly complex part is deciding how much of each you're willing to pay so that the story you want to tell about yourself doesn't end up turning against you. The movement is clear. The blue side has been scouting athletes and closing direct deals. It's not just about the 80-20 revenue split. There are also one-off payments and sponsorships to get certain figures on board and turn them into ambassadors. The goal isn't to hide the business, it's to reframe it, to have fans see slices of sports, effort, backstage, and from there, lead them into the subscription model. To push that shift in perception, the Blue Site has launched its own sports front, articles, profiles, and chronicles of their athletes on a blog that serves as a showcase. It's classic marketing playbook. Tell me stories, show me workouts, display badges and jerseys. I forget the stigma and stay for the narrative. That narrative, not a minor detail, is what allows a player with a real community to step in without it feeling like a leap into the void. What seals the move is the full arena effect. Seeing other athletes already inside lowers the psychological barrier. If your peers are there, it feels normal. That's pure social proof. And since user acquisition is powered by each athlete's open social networks, the platform's acquisition cost plummets. The creator makes noise on Instagram/TikTok and redirects traffic to her paid profile. The blue site capitalizes on the conversion without having to fight CPMs in an ad war. Short-term win-win. From a WNBA player's point of view, this ecosystem offers two hard-to-ignore perks: control over the product and control over the payout. No TV lineup boxing you in, no brand editing your message. You build your own narrative and get paid straight from the fan. For the audience, the entry point is the sport. For the platform, the reward is reputational. More three-pointers, less prejudice. Legitimacy by osmosis. Of course, nothing comes free. Every inch of legitimacy the platform gains is debated by sponsors, leagues, and traditional media. For the athlete, it solves finances and brings structure to the schedule. For the ecosystem, it adds noise. How much of this normalization is narrative and how much is business? For now, the answer lies in the numbers. If the public follows you and the paywall is there, the conversion happens. And if the site highlights you on a sports blog and places you in a broader storyline, the leap no longer feels like a rupture. It becomes continuity. The result is a self-reinforcing loop, more well-known names, more fans crossing over, more creators taking the leap. And at the center, a discomfort no one wants to say out loud if the respectable door into the mainstream is increasingly through sports content on the blue site. Who's really shaping the culture, the league, the brands, or the algorithm of a platform that learned to speak basketball? Let's zoom out. Outside the WNBA, most athletes don't live like superstars. Sports has a fragile middle class, talented competitors performing at the highest level who, once the stadium lights go out, are still counting pennies. In the Olympic world, for example, the average income for a track and field athlete is around $15,000 a year. Meanwhile, the IOC brings in over $7 billion per cycle, but doesn't pay athletes directly. The money goes to federations and committees, and from there, if it gets there, it's distributed. That math explains why so many athletes need a plan B to supplement their income. And it's not just perception. Studies show that 80% of professional athletes in the US don't consider themselves financially stable. In other words, performance is in top gear, but the bank account is running on empty. When that's the baseline, any path that allows for direct monetization of one's audience stops being a luxury and becomes a tool. It might be camps, clinics, newsletters, memberships, or the subscription shortcut offered by the blue site with its promise of immediate payout and full narrative control. The underlying trend is the same everywhere, cutting out the middlemen. If the old path was brand TV media fan, now the route can be athlete fan, and that's it. The creator economy pushes the value of attention toward the person who generates it, and platforms like the Blue site understand that. They offer high payouts and low friction as long as each creator brings in their own traffic from open social platforms. For a player, that boils down to a simple phrase: if your community exists, you can monetize it. Now, how you monetize affects the kind of content that performs. In that ecosystem, what sparks curiosity, fantasy, or intimacy pays more than educational or informative content. We just saw that with the logic of showing skin. You don't need a full breakdown to understand that the income spikes are there. For sports, without big contracts, that reality doesn't just explain individual decisions, it creates a gravitational pull toward direct monetization, with both its rewards and its scars. Seen from that angle, the phenomenon in the W has less to do with provocation and more with economic geometry. If the global ecosystem distributes poorly and attention is already on your side, the temptation to monetize it directly, no middlemen, naturally emerges. Some do it through camps and brand deals, others through memberships or OF. The pattern is the same: capture value that used to be lost to commissions, bureaucracy, and promises of visibility that didn't pay the bills. And while every case has its nuances, the push coming from outside the WNBA helps explain why, for many, that door no longer looks like a breakaway, but rather a continuation. In the WNBA, image isn't only played out on the court, it's played in the spotlight. Are you validated by a brand or by your people? The classic path is clear: maintain a clean image, get more TV minutes, build a friendly voice for family-oriented sponsors. The new path is rougher but more direct: speak to your audience with no middlemen, get paid directly, and set your own tone and limits on how much skin you show. These are two competing logics aiming for the same thing: the value of your attention. For sponsors, the playbook was written decades ago. Brand safety comes first. If a player crosses over to the blue site, perception weighs heavily. There are marketing teams that see red before even hearing the full story. It doesn't automatically cancel anyone, but it can scare off sponsorships and leave a reputational trail that reappears whenever a renewal or a big campaign comes up. That's the most expensive side of the decision, the reputational footprint that doesn't easily fade. On the other hand, the creator economy shifts the focus. Who keeps the value? In the traditional model, money flows through long chains: league, media, sponsors, and what you get is a slice of a slice. In the direct model, memberships, subscriptions, tips, the flow reverses: fewer intermediaries, a higher percentage for the creator, and more control over the product and calendar. For part of the audience, that sounds like empowerment. The attention you generate pays you, not others. The tension becomes surgical when content enters the picture. In the brand commercial route, tone and image come with clear boundaries. In the direct route, you set the boundaries, but the market rewards what hints at or shows more skin. That asymmetry isn't theoretical. If you stick to healthy healthy backstage, the numbers stay modest. If you lean toward what sparks desire, income rises, and so do image costs. That's where part of society sees economic pressure more than freedom, while another part celebrates the athlete earning without asking for permission. Both truths live inside the same move. Validation changes too. In the brand model, a third party vouches for you. You were chosen for that campaign. You were the face of that bank. Your image passed legal. In the direct model, the people with their credit cards vouch for you. If they pay, you exist. The difference hits hard for a WNBA player who wants to tell her story unfiltered. Ownership of the message, control of the income, and a sense of independence that the ad circuit doesn't always allow. But the price is on the flip side. Less room for mistakes, more backlash if you raise the level of exposure, and that persistent question, how much is today's gain worth if it costs you something tomorrow? Many players are caught in the middle, navigating the contradiction, because it's not just about money, it's about career, athletic identity, and staying eligible for schools, foundations, and community projects. And at the same time, it's the reality of an industry where 1 week of subscriptions can pay more than years of a contract. There's no universal formula, just an uncomfortable question that echoes in every decision. Would you rather be validated by a brand or by your own audience? Liz Cambage isn't here as a footnote, she's a case study. All-Star, approximately $221,000 salary with the Las Vegas Aces in 2021, and at the same time, the stat that lit up the board. Reports say she made more on OnlyFans in her first week than in her entire WNBA career. The comparison stretches even further in another version, $900,000 over her league career versus $1.5 million in 7 days. She launched her account in 2021, drawing a clear line between the traditional contract and direct monetization. That's where the story gains depth. It's not just about money, it's about ownership of the narrative. Cambage herself frames it with a simple idea that basketball wasn't all of me. And that nuance helps explain why the blue site is attractive to some players. You define what you show, how much, and at what price. Control shifts from TV schedules and brand guidelines to the fan's credit card, and that fundamentally changes the kind of decisions an athlete can make about her image. The incentive, however, comes with strings. In that ecosystem, it's not the workout routines or backstage moments that pay most. If you don't show skin, your chances of serious income drop. Pushing content toward less clothing accelerates earnings but introduces brand costs, lost sponsorships, closed doors, and a digital footprint that sticks to your name when you go to negotiate your next campaign or try to reshape your public image. There's also the operational side. Cambage kept her platform and played outside the WNBA, revealing a practical insight. The direct model is portable. It doesn't depend on a local contract or a specific media outlet. It runs on community. For a player who splits the year across leagues and projects, that portability is a weapon. Income that travels with you on your own schedule with no need to ask for permission. Seen as a mirror, the Cambage case distills the tension running through the WNBA. Contract and reputation on one side, OF and control on the other. Stability versus speed. Corporate narrative versus personal narrative. There's no neat solution, just a structure of incentives that works perfectly for some, feels uncomfortable for others, but undeniably exists and weighs on every decision. When a WNBA player opens a profile on the blue site, the conversation splits in two. For one group, it's empowerment in its purest form, setting the stage, naming the price, and getting paid directly without asking for permission. For another, it's a symptom of something harsher, an ecosystem that, when salaries fall short, pushes players to raise their level of exposure beyond what many would have chosen under normal circumstances. The sources we used lay it out plainly. If you're not willing to show skin, your chances of earning serious money drop. That's where freedom begins to blur into necessity. The second edge is about branding. Aligning your name with a platform still associated with adult content can hurt sponsorships or directly scare off brands that live and breathe brand safety. You don't need a scandal. Perception alone can stick to your name. That risk, described in the materials, works like a boomerang. Today the money comes in. Tomorrow that label might keep you out of major campaigns, educational partnerships, or community projects that protect their image under a microscope. There's also an ethical dimension that can't be resolved with slogans. For some, OF offers a legitimate exit, message ownership, and a high percentage of earnings. For others, it normalizes a standard in which, to get paid for real, you have to lean into less clothing, shifting the definition of what counts as sports content and pushing the more vulnerable to cross lines they wouldn't cross in a different context. That's the minefield, a powerful economic incentive reshaping personal decisions. Underneath it all, the creator economy is shifting tectonic plates. Massive social platforms offer visibility but pay little directly. The blue site flips the model, promising a higher cut to the creator with fewer tolls and more control over the calendar. That benefit coexists with the branding baggage and with unwritten rules about what type of content performs and what doesn't, that directly impacts any athlete trying to balance sports identity and income. In that tug of war, every decision has an opportunity cost. Less exposure preserves trajectory and brand partnerships. More exposure accelerates income, but narrows the map of companies willing to walk beside you. This isn't a moral verdict, it's the engineering of incentives operating in plain sight with concrete economic outcomes and reputational scars that may last longer than any contract. In the end, the full picture is less epic and more about accounting. On one side, the WNBA contract, with its prestige, its calendar, its promise of a career. On the other, the blue site, with its payment engineering, its speed in turning attention into cash, and its unspoken rule that showing skin almost always pays more. In between, real life, bills to pay, injuries, short performance windows, the pressure to capitalize on your visibility before it fades. There's also something you can't put on a spreadsheet: identity. What you choose to say about yourself when no one's holding a mic to your face. The clean route opens doors with brands, media, schools. The direct route gives you control of the narrative and the money, but it leaves a mark. The immediate versus the lasting. Today's income versus tomorrow's name. If the culture rewards the highlight over the box score, the spicy backstage over tactics, then the move isn't just personal, it's systemic. The league, the brands, the platforms, and the audience are all shifting the bar at once. Inside that shift, every player's decision becomes a silent statement that reshapes the map. And maybe the most honest thing to say is, there's no neat exit. There are choices with costs you can see and others that show up later. The game goes on, the spotlight moves, and each player is left with the only things that aren't up for negotiation: her name, her body, and the story she chose to tell. Drop your thoughts in the comment section. This was Hoop Secrets, and I'll see you next time.